I always read, like, in the campus crime section in the newspaper, like, I always read about, it seems like every single issue, someone experiences a case of sexual assault.
For anyone, for the university or anybody to say that it doesn't is ridiculous.
Okay, sexual violence does occur, but what triggers sexual violence and how do we attack those problems to kind of eliminate this conversation that we're having right now?
If DePauw could describe sexual violence in one word, what would it be?
Uncomfortable.
Tragic.
Victimization.
Unjust.
Abuse.
Awful.
Rape.
Unnecessary.
Taboo.
Wrong.
Misunderstood.
What is the point?
Blame.
Shame.
Outdated.
Covert.
Abhorrent.
Selfish.
Sickening.
Strange, but disgusting.
Unacceptable.
Unjust.
Not cool.
Undeserving.
Unfair.
Cruel. Immoral.
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 Understatement.
Disgusting.
Disheartening.
Sorrow.
Why?
Terrifying.
Insulting.
Taboo.
Abuse.
Numbing.
Pain.
Hurtful.
Wrong.
Sad.
Pathetic.
Where we stand.
This is something that I never really talk about. When you walk into fraternities, there's definitely like an unsaid rule that like you condone like what's happening here, and so you agree you're not going to like report when you see alcohol or underage drinking. You're not going to report someone smoking marijuana, and so I feel like the situation of being in a fraternity like it definitely loosens like the social constraints of it.
Yeah.
In a way, and so I can see that it'd be more prone there, especially because everyone's drunk. And just the stigma of being in a fraternity, some people probably just kind of, shrug it off. Maybe not shrug it off, they just try not to make a big deal out of it because it's a fraternity.
DePauw administration, I mean, obviously they want all of their students to be these wonderful people, and I think a lot of us are. I just think that there are people that make those horrible decisions and they just haven't come through and really punish the perpetrators for those decisions.
The atmosphere on campus with sexual assault is difficult because a lot of guys feel like they don't have a say in this, and if they're accused of sexual assault, how are they really going to defend themselves?
There are the girls who do something when they're drunk and then regret it the next day and say that it was done without their consent, even though they were agreeing to it then. And I know that in Indiana, it's actually, their consent's not able to be given under the influence, but I mean, it's done all the time.
First question always asked is, are you sure? Like, are you sure this has happened? When I think the more it should be of a more like a hospitable environment, like you should more nurture instead of just like question.
I don't want to be naive and say that sexual assault doesn't happen on this campus, but I can't say that I've heard very much about it.
I feel like a lot of people don't really want to admit that, but I feel like it happens everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. It can happen to anyone, anytime. Someone can slip something into your drink. Someone can take advantage of you if you've had too much to drink.
There's a blame game going on. There's okay, so who did this, and we need to target these people, but as the process, as the progress continues, I think everyone comes to the realization that, okay, this is serious, that this is not just a rumor or a myth going around, that this is something that needs to be addressed, this is something that needs to be addressed on every side of the campus.
A group against an individual, I think, because we have a very pack mentality here, because I think we're divided into so many different specific houses or specific organizations.
As far as like the student body goes, I think they just, first off, I think that they look negatively as far as like any sexual assault like campaign on campus in general. Like, I know for, like, there was a joke going along like the lines of like, oh, code teal, like if someone's like made uncomfortable or in a situation, they'd like say code teal.
I was looking at the website and it's really vague, and it's like, DePauw does not stand for sexual misconduct. It does not, okay, great. What do you do about it? Where do you go? Who do you talk to?
Freshman year, there is always an event called the Highlighter Party. This is a much anticipated event for some freshmen because it allows us a coordinated space to get to know, dance, and party around our classmates. The idea for a lot of people I know was to pre-game and go drunk, or to sneak in alcohol and drink in the bathroom. I drank a lot of cheap alcohol with 6 or 7 different people in a dorm room, and then headed down to the den to start dancing. We danced for a long time, and I was in and out of consciousness when a boy from Humbert asked if I wanted to go smoke some pot. I said yes and followed him to go get his weed from his room, not thinking that anything sexual was intended. I blacked out, but when I woke up, I was naked and this boy was having sex with me. I immediately jumped out of the bed and I couldn't find any of my clothes. I tried to leave with the few items I could find, but he pulled me back into the room and I lost consciousness again. I don't know or remember what happened from there. Despite education efforts, there is a gap in understanding between the university and DePauw students. Though they have tried to spread the word, students are still not aware of the steps the administration takes when handling sexual violence.
The services are very hard to kind of come by. I know they're there, I don't know what they are.
They would hopefully do an investigation of some kind, maybe interview or screen the people involved who are supposedly involved, find out if it's if it's a valid claim or not, and then proceed from there with the correct actions.
Public safety is alerted, and I think you either get to choose between a hearing at school or actually press charges.
I honestly couldn't even tell you where I would go besides public safety to try and report one of these incidences. I don't feel that it's very publicly broadcasted or announced very well of where people can go to get help.
I imagine they go to the Women's Center and that they're given some counseling of some sort if they want it.
I just don't know, and that is a problem. I don't know how a sexual assault is dealt with.
I do think that when a situation does arise, I feel like they actually do deal with the situation in a good way. I know that investigations go through and they're very thorough.
I really don't think our school talks to us about it or really mentions that, what we should do in a situation if we feel uncomfortable. I don't really think, especially freshmen who just come into college don't really understand where to go to or who to talk to.
I assume that there is some sort of disciplinary action, that the victim is given help, but I honestly don't know what happens really. I don't hear anything about it at all.
Even though the actions taken are not apparent to students, there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. DePauw not only has campus resources, but refers students to use community services as well.
We train our RAs in terms of basic crisis response. So if someone comes and reports to them, we do our best, and the RAs are trained to really do their best to get them referred to another resource.
Usually in my office, kind of a private setting, we'll do a pretty thorough history. We have a form that we have to go by, so really specific questions. Might seem a little invasive, but it's just to help guide the exam. Then we'll offer STD prophylaxis with medication, or we can offer Plan B for free if necessary. And then we'll give them a list of referrals, encourage them to maybe seek counseling if they want to do that.
I work at Putnam County Hospital. I'm an emergency room nurse. They have the opportunity to see me in the emergency room because I have a room designated for sexual assault exams.
Anyone is welcome to come and access our services. It's completely confidential, and we do have in the past and still do support a lot of DePauw students. We have a support group that meets every Monday evening from 5:30 to 7, and everyone is welcome.
The fact that our facility is called the Women's Center may be a barrier sometimes for male students to feel like that's a place where they can go, but it definitely is a place that serves all of our students. It's a safe space for students to come, and not just for survivors of sexual violence, but for all students, men and women alike. We have a safe room in our facility, and that is a place where students who need to get out of their living situation can move to temporarily and stay.
When I interview both victims and suspects in a sexual assault, we want to make sure that we're following all the rules of evidence for a criminal case as well as a university case, so that the possibility to have criminal charges still exists.
My responsibility is really for the adjudication process for our sexual misconduct policy. I am responsible for deciding whether or not the university would go forward with charging someone for a violation of the sexual misconduct policy. If I do feel that what we call a preponderance of evidence may exist, then I would go forward with a charge. They have the option of accepting responsibility for a policy violation. If they accepted responsibility, then I would sanction that person appropriately. If they denied responsibility, then they would go to a sexual misconduct hearing with our hearing board.
I am in charge of running the hearing itself, working with the board members for a particular panel ahead of time to look at the written materials that we have about the case that's coming before us and to decide which questions we want to ask. If you make a report, you don't lose control. You still have an awful lot to say about what happens going forward.
We do everything in our power to keep the situation very private.
We're not able to speak about it very openly, and so I think that's frustrating for students. I think that students who get involved and understand the process and understand all the things that go into it kind of acknowledge that we have a really quite a good process here and good system put into place, but not everybody knows that.
A survey about sexual violence was sent out to DePauw's campus, and 324 students participated. It gauged students' perceptions on sexual assault and rape and how DePauw handles these cases. Once the survey was over, staff and administrators were given the results, and their initial reaction to them was caught on camera. 65% of the respondents were female, while only 35% were male. Most of the respondents were seniors, making up 36% of the survey. Sophomores and juniors were close in making up the next group, with first years only making up 18% of the answers. DePauw students were asked to think if our campus has the same amount of sexual assaults and rape cases as other colleges. 103 people disagreed, 104 agreed, and 90 were neutral. This question was purposefully vague to see if people thought agree meant more or less. The same goes for disagree. Students were asked to judge if DePauw does a good job in handling sexual assault cases on campus. The majority chose to be neutral to avoid choosing a side, while 92 people agreed and 72 disagreed. 32 respondents strongly disagreed that DePauw does a good job. It was up to the student to decide what good meant. Does DePauw have a lot of resources to help victims of sexual assault? A large majority of respondents agreed, while 45 students disagreed. 69 students chose to remain neutral. Staff and administration were surprised by these findings.
That's interesting to me. I'm glad that we're getting good marks in terms of having resources, and I just would hope that people will begin to see the misconduct hearing board as and the process leading up to that as one of those resources.
I think it's good that there's a chunk of people who agree that we have a lot of resources. I think that is one of the things that we do better than most campuses in terms of the number of resources we have, so it's good that people sort of recognize that.
10% is a high number for people that strongly disagree that we do a good job handling those cases, so I think that's something that's interesting.
I don't know. But I do know there's a huge misunderstanding between what we think they should know, what they know, and what they do about it.
Yes or no, I know someone who has been assaulted or raped on campus and who did not report it. 43% said yes. 57% said no. Out of that 43% who did know someone, 55 of them gave the amount of people they knew on campus that did not report their rape.
Honestly, it makes me a little emotional.
Over 10.
What's interesting to me about these numbers too is that these are the folks that respondents to your survey are aware of. There are so many people who are survivors who, haven't talked about it for one reason or another, that these numbers would be, even higher than that.
And I know some of the cases that we've had in the last few years have been very they haven't been public, so, you know, they aren't public, but they've been gossiped about and talked about a lot. So I'm surprised that people didn't say that they knew someone.
It's interesting to see the numbers there and to see it listed out.
These numbers don't surprise me. That doesn't mean I'm not terribly sad about it, but it's not a surprise.
According to 71% of the respondents, there is a misunderstanding about the term consent and how it's interpreted under the law. 29% believed it was a clear definition everyone understood. 112 people gave their own unique definitions of consent, but none of them are exactly the same.
You know, this one kind of hits on the Indiana state law, which doesn't really address consent.
Sober, yes.
A lot of people think that being drunk is consenting versus explicitly saying yes.
An enthusiastic yes. That'd be awesome.
Anything other than yes, including not objecting, does not count as consent.
I think consent means both parties explicitly and verbally state they want to engage in the sexual activity. I think that's a very important one because things are clear and they're explicit and they're verbal. It's harder for things to be misunderstood.
No means no. Both have to be conscious. Yep.
In the final question of the survey, students were asked if alcohol is a contributing factor in sexual assaults on campus. An overwhelming majority, or 98% of the respondents, said yes.
All of the cases that I can recall over the last 8 to 10 years as a member of the sexual misconduct hearing board and ultimately chair, I can't think of a single case where alcohol wasn't involved.
Students' perceptions of alcohol being an issue are pretty spot on.
We don't just address alcohol. We never just address alcohol. We always include sexual assault because we know that those two things are tied together.
Not surprising. Alcohol is definitely a contributing factor in most sexual assaults on campus.
Wow. 97. Again, probably not surprising.
I can remember one where neither party was intoxicated, and I can remember one more where the accused student was not intoxicated. That's all I can remember in 15 years.
During college, less than 5% of victims who were raped will report it to the authorities. While there are many benefits to reporting, students understand why victims often keep it to themselves.
People that report it, were maybe drunk at the time or they were unconscious. And so a lot of times I don't know that they're really given credibility, even though they were in fact sexually assaulted.
Well, it's a small campus, and I don't know, I guess maybe there's probably a barrier or something that gets in the way in terms of really taking that leap, so to speak, to report it.
It would be very hard to talk to somebody about it, especially someone who maybe might seem like a stranger and you might not trust them. Or you could get into sticky situations with not wanting to get the other person in trouble.
Someone who believes that they are a victim of sexual assault may look back on it and think to themselves, and maybe don't report it because they don't think that they should report it. Maybe they look back on the situation and say, all right, this may have happened, but there is something along the lines in the storyline of how this happened that I could be a little bit at fault as well.
Actually, I think a lot of it is because people don't always know what counts as sexual assault too. Like if their friend maybe was the person that assaulted them, they maybe just think it's like, oh, that was an awkward situation. It wasn't really anything serious that happened. It was just a mistake, misunderstanding, whatever.
A lot of people are kind of concerned about how other people will see them, and are concerned about, since it's such a small school, who will find out, what will find, like what people will think.
The person they're talking to could say, well, could you have done anything different? Could you have not been wearing a provocative outfit? Could you have maybe been more sober?
I think there's a bit of shock with friends. I think friends usually distance themselves at first. They don't really believe it. Even I know when my friend told me back home that she had been raped, I had this moment where I was like, I can't believe you right now.
Even the legal stuff, just having to deal with investigations, lawyers, and all that. I mean, that is a lot of work, a lot of money.
You have certain, human rights that you deserve, and so I think every individual needs to know that they have the right to stand up for their human rights. But I think a lot of times doesn't happen out of fear.
It was a Saturday in September, and I had taken my best friend to my informal. We were back on campus around 8 p.m., and like any other girl getting ready to go out, I pre-gamed with about 3 shots and a mixed drink. Fast forward an hour or so later, and I am at a frat party that seemed business as usual for me as an upperclassman used to my surroundings. I remember that night I drank a little here and there throughout the night, but nothing that would have ever caused me to black out. I was in the basement of this frat, and I was dancing with my friend with 2 of our guy friends. Next thing I know, my friend had disappeared without any warning, no text, no phone call, no indication of her desire to leave. The next thing I remember, I was walking through the basement searching for anyone I knew, and then darkness. I woke up on the floor of my bedroom in Rector. I was completely naked. My door was wide open. The fan I kept on in my room was broken in half. The scarves hanging on my wall were torn off. There was a used condom in the drawers where I kept my sheets and pillowcases. Bruises inside my thighs, on my knees, and a bruised rib. I was horrified, embarrassed, and confused. I knew I never drank enough to black out for 8 hours, but I couldn't find it within myself to trust that someone had taken advantage of me and had vigilantly waited until I was alone.
These are higher level things and lots of emotions involved in lots of different things.
People know that reporting gets you access to a ton of different resources, people who will listen to you, people who will believe you, people who will tell you it's not your fault.
It sends a message to the community that this is not going to be tolerated, this is wrong, sexual assault is a crime, and it also empowers the victim.
If you report it, then you have a better chance of, having evidence that you were raped.
Students need to be held accountable for their actions, and we always hope that this process can help facilitate that.
In an effort to close the gap in understanding between the university and the students when it comes to sexual violence, administrators and staff are constantly changing their tactics to appeal to the current student body.
Most recently, we did a campaign called Wingman 101. It was a collaboration with Interfraternity Council, and 9 out of 10 fraternities, IFC fraternities, participated in Wingman 101, and it was a poster campaign. So we designed posters that are specific to the 9 organizations that we worked with to bring awareness to the issue of high-risk alcohol use, sexual violence, and remind them of their values that their organizations hold dear, as a way to encourage folks that if they saw problematic behavior, whether that was pre-assault behaviors, stalking behaviors, or high-risk alcohol behaviors, that they would recognize that they can intervene and that would be good for everyone. They would actually benefit themselves and their organization.
We're working with a new program called Green Dot that really is, it's focused on bystander intervention. So it's focused on, again, taking the conversation of personalized power-based violence and really trying to take the whole victim and perpetrator side out of things and get people intervening before there is what we would refer to as a red dot.
For me, bystander intervention is really just empowering people to know what to look for and how to intervene, how to step in. So seeing a situation that doesn't seem quite right, just being able to know when to step in and how to step in, or bringing in other resources, because sometimes intervention doesn't mean stepping in oneself, but it means bringing other people to get them involved as well.
Figuring out a way to be a little, sometimes less polite while still being respectful, and get the issues out there, be able to talk about them, and be able to move on them and move forward.
So I think it is our responsibility to teach different messages, even if we don't see anyone else around us doing it. It is our responsibility to protect our students.
We're open for critique. We're open for change, and we're constantly evaluating what we're doing.
The university isn't the only group spreading awareness of sexual violence. Code Teal, led entirely by students, works hard to make students acknowledge that it is a significant problem.
We're a sexual assault awareness campaign that tries to encourage education and conversation.
Code Teal started last year as like a grassroots movement, and it started from a lot of women on campus, and it was, I guess, hubbed in a feminista meeting. One night in particular, like 4 of us stayed up really late one night talking about like why we were pissed off about what was happening on campus, like, and just listening to each other and listing all the different reasons that this was something that needed to be dealt with. And by the end, we had such a long laundry list of people that we realized, like, if we were truly that pissed off, like, we needed to do something. One of the seniors last year, we were trying to come up with a name, and Michelina she was like, well, the color's teal, so what about making an acronym out of it? What about Code Teal? So we came up with Code Teal, which is talk, educate, advocate, and listen. It's something that we don't talk about, something that we need to talk about, something that some of us are educated on and some of us aren't, and there's very much a disconnect in that conversation and advocating for survivors and just listening to one another, whether it's being somebody who's telling you their story or somebody who's just telling you a story.
It's one of those problems on the DePauw campus that we can actually for the most part, easily fix, right? If somebody commits sexual assault intentionally and in a serial way, you kick them out of school. And the community should be behind that movement.
1 in 33! No more! 1 in 4! No more!
Last semester's week was really discouraging. I think Brittany and I spent a lot of time on it, put a lot of energy into it, and then there was really low turnout for the conversations, and we were just hearing a lot of really negative stuff about Code Teal.
So the Code Teal walk, I thought it went very well, but there are aspects of it that I was disappointed with. After walking around campus, we rallied, or marched, I guess, through the GCPA, which ended up going pretty well. People kind of stared at us. And then we went through the hub, and the thing that I was most disappointed with was the fact that when we came through the hub and somebody asked what we were doing, we said it was the Code Teal sexual assault awareness movement. That there started to be smirks and like a lot of scoffs and a lot of stares, like, why are you making a spectacle out of yourself? Like, what are you doing?
There was some booing and some laughing and some real immaturity, and I think that's sad because it says that this is probably going to be an issue that continues to be a problem.
I guarantee there are people in that room that have been affected by this, and there are people in that room that left there feeling worse than they did when they walked in.
Some really beautiful things were shared at the end, and it showed me that people do care about getting rid of sexual assault on the DePauw campus.
I think it's something that you have different outlets. It could piss you off, it could make you upset, it could make you uncomfortable, and I think you can obviously join Code Teal. Like, we're always looking for new coordinators, new members. You can plan an event, you can just be there for support. You can start your own movement on campus. You can find your own outlet and not be afraid to share your own voice in a different way.
The women who've been touched by sexual assault on this campus would pick up this crusade, come out, tell their stories, and really make it an issue that can't be ignored. And then real policy changes would start to be enacted that would possibly be harder on people who commit sexual assault. There would be an encouraging of having a conversation when you first get here about sexual assault and consent in college, that males and females are both required to attend.
I think it's going to take an interesting turn next year, which change is great, but 2 of the main coordinators are both fraternity members, and I think that'll be great. I think that'll be a great change and a great way to get new people involved.
If this documentary inspired you to get involved, please attend the next Code Teal meeting to join the crusade on campus. If not, please discuss it with your friends. The more we talk about this issue, the more aware we will be. Once we become more educated as a campus, we will be able to change where we stand.